We know the Guardians' post-game press conferences don't give us much to go on. Neither do the off-season press conferences. But the Guardians did reveal one area they're looking into. We'll talk about how the Guardians can attack that area of their roster on today's Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into another edition of Locked On Guardians, Wednesday, October 8th, 2025. The offseason continues, and we're still here with you every single day. Your Cleveland Guardians every day. We cover your Guardians, the majors, the minors, the draft, everything in between. We've got major league stuff. We got minor league stuff for you today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I am, of course, Justin Lada. If you're new here, I have been here with my friend and co-host for the last 3 years, Jeff Ellis. And I've spent the last 18 years covering the Guardians minor league system, including seeing a top prospect pitch in 2021 who is finally back in a game tonight again.
And as you mentioned, I'm Jeff Ellis. I've been here for 1,600 episodes of this very podcast, so that's where you probably know me from. If not, you might know me from my time as national writer at Scout and 24/7, focused on prospects in the draft. I want to thank you for making today's episode your first listen today and every day, wherever it is that you get podcasts. Shout out to Justin's newsletter. Go check that out if you want more prospect details and information from the AFL. And I want to thank you. Big shout out to all of our everydayers. You showed up big on today's episode. We really appreciate everyone jumping in. Off season can be a little more hard to get eyes on, so we appreciate everyone who's sticking with us. The true diehards, the true everydayers who are here even when the games are done.
Absolutely. Yeah, shout out to the insiders. We'll chat on Wednesday night at 6 o'clock with the insiders if you want to be part of that. That is joinsubtext.com/LockedOnGuardians. All right, so yeah, she'll be coaching soccer. My wife will be teaching or doing conferences, and I'll be talking ball with all of our great community. All right, we got a lot to get to on today's show, so we better hurry up and run through it. We'll talk about the Guardians' post-mortem press conference from the end of the season. We'll talk about who's coming back from the coaching staff in the front office. We'll get into some injury details as well as the Arizona Fall League starting on Tuesday night. We'll talk about the Guardians' payroll, everyone's favorite subject. We'll touch on whether or not the Guardians will have financial flexibility this offseason. But we'll start today's show talking about the Guardians' one area that they sort of addressed in the postseason press conference, and that is the outfield. So a lot to get into on that. Before we dive into it, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you're a new customer, bet $5. If your $5 bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download FanDuel today. All right, we know we don't normally get a lot out of the Guardians in these conferences. We debated even having this show on this. We were going to talk about the 40-man roster, which we'll still talk about later this week, so make sure you tune into that. But I thought there was enough that came out of this for us to run with on some interesting ideas for a show. And I thought it was interesting that they acknowledged that the offense was not good. What else would you say? Would you say, oh, the offense was fine? I mean, that's just, cleaning. There was a lot of questions that I watched that didn't get answered, talking about financials and other stuff like that, and they just completely glossed over the question, as they always do with a lot of doublespeak. So you always have to be careful about reading between the lines, all this other stuff, because they say a lot of words, not saying anything at all. But they were pretty forthcoming about, hey, offense wasn't good. We have to get better at offense. We know this. And they also said outfield was a clear area of need to improve. The thing with that, though, is they can say that publicly, and remember, words and actions are two different things, because while they say, well, hey, outfield's an area of importance where we know we need to upgrade or at least have improvements at, those improvements they could really point at and say, well, we're going to rely on internal improvements because they're going to want Chase DeLauter, who, by the way, is not playing in the Arizona Fall League, not due to injury, just because the team felt like it was best for him to go home and condition his body and be ready for the season next year and get his rest. So he's fine.
They're wrapping him in bubble tape and bubble wrap. He's just going in a suit of bubble wrap all the time.
A cryogenic chamber for the offseason is where he should be. Yes. With Harrison Ford.
And George Valera.
And George Valera as well, but not Daniel Espino, who we'll talk about later on today's show. So you're ideally saying, well, next year we'd like Chase DeLauter to get the majority of the pass in the outfield. There's still Stephen Kwan, who we talked about in yesterday's show. There's George Valera. And they still have to deal with whether or not they think that John Kenzanoil or Jonathan Rodriguez are major leaguers. They're not.
And
So
Capus is also in that mix as well.
Capus is too. So the question is, they can say, we know we have to get better. The outfield's got to improve. But are they saying that as, hey, we want to bring in external candidates, or are they looking more internally? Because I'd be very careful about how you read into that, because I think a lot of it is going to be internal.
Yeah, I'll say this. Last year, they knew they needed to adjust starting pitching, and they did it, right? They did it by casting a wide net. They might cast a bit of a wide net again, but it's going to be, I was talking with Just Not Fair. If you look at the top 10 free agents, top 10 outfielders by WAR in this free agent class, number 10 is Willie Castro. And if you aren't paying attention, it was a bad time once he got traded.
That's all-star Willie Castro to you, by the way.
It's really, really bad. Let's just put it that way. This is not a strong free agent class. There's not. I will say this, though. There's a few guys I like as platoon bats. I know people don't want to hear that, but the Tigers having their struggles, but they made it through the year by leaning heavily into their platoons, having Jackson and Carpenter. Cleveland's problem with the platoons was they didn't have a good option. So, it's like I kind of look at it like maybe unless they can find a way to convince someone to take a lot of money, not a lot, but like a decent chunk of change for 1 year, like they're probably going to have to figure out, other ways to work around it, which is what they did last year. We'll get into more of that later, but this situation with the outfield, it does kind of feel like, Kwan in left, Chase in center, and then maybe Valera in right. I mean, you're counting on a lot of guys being healthy who have never been healthy. I mean, even Kwan gets beat up every season. That's team injury, the outfield. And then, I guess you hope that some of the other young players will step up, and then you can kind of play them at other spots depending on need, if players force the issue in terms of what happens. And, there's always injuries. That's baseball. But it does feel like they're kind of counting on those young players first because, again, I mean, free agency is not good for outfielders. I mean, free agency is never – we could do like a whole week of shows on just like the sucker bet that is free agency. Like it's, unless you can afford to shop at the top of the market, which small market teams don't do. I mean, one can make a case in terms of bottom 5 markets, which Cleveland is the second smallest market, that the last, top free agent that was signed by one was Cleveland with Edwin Encarnacion. Heck, they gave out one of the 10 biggest contracts in terms of average value last year when they signed Shane Bieber. It's tied for the 10th highest average value contract. So it's not necessarily what people want to hear, especially those who love to rage, but the improvement does feel like, everyone likes Valera and DeLauter. They should be happy to hear that they're making pathways potentially for them, not blocking them with mediocre talent, and maybe trying to find ways to help supplement those players in lesser ways, or maybe they finally do the thing that they've never done in recent memory, which is take a bunch of players and condense it and try to, find a target that makes sense to trade for. I just, we'll do some of our trade talks. I think that's going to be very hard to find because there aren't sellers right now. There just aren't. There aren't a lot of teams in clear rebuild where you can go out and get that outfielder with 4 years of control by trading away 3 to 4 really interesting prospects. I just don't think that exists too much right now, but we'll get into that later on down the road.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like when you say there's two things people will say, well, go out and buy bats. Well, that has to be a bat worth it that's in their price range. And people were saying, well, if they would have got bats in the offseason last year, they'd still be playing. And we'll take a look back at this past year of free agent contracts and we'll say, I really can't sit there and see anybody that made a lot of sense for them outside of like a Gleyber Torres. Although I wanted Mike Tauchman, he turned out pretty good, I will say. But that was money they could have afforded. There was nobody who was like a big bat. Everyone's like, want a big bat. And like you said, on the trade market, teams got to be willing to trade with you. And you have to have prospects that teams want, your players that teams want, and they also have to be willing to give up major leaguers. And that's just not the case as it is. The other thing I want to point out, too, is that they do need to add in the outfield somehow because you can't go into next year and assume that you're going to get 140 games out of Chase DeLauter or George Valera. You just cannot assume that. Even Stephen Kwan, his wrist was bothering him throughout the year. He won't need surgery, thankfully, but his wrist was bothering him throughout the year. Hopefully that explains more of the second half decline, but it's not the first time it's happened to him, and he continues to have injury issues anyway that may not keep him out of the lineup, but they at least hurt his performance, and that hurts him and it hurts the Guardians. So either way, they have to add someone in the outfield just for depth, but hopefully that depth is much more quality. All right, we're going to talk about everyone's favorite subject, payroll, and how the Guardians will fare this offseason if they have any financial flexibility to make a move in the outfield. Coming up next on today's Locked On Guardians. The NFL season, it is ongoing, and hey, weird stuff's going on. A lot of quarterbacks are hurt. Quarterbacks are getting traded. So maybe you want to be careful about what you do on FanDuel. But they do have an offer that's going to be really good for you if you're a first-time customer. You can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. So if you pick a bet and you put down $5 if you're a new customer and it hits, you're going to unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I was taking a look at the Tigers and Mariners for Game 4. The Mariners have a chance to send this thing home and go to the first ALCS since 2001. It's Bryce Miller and Casey Mize. It's the the Tigers are favored by 1.5. I gotta be honest. I think the Mariners are in good shape. It's Bryce Miller. He hasn't been great. I don't know. I might say the Tigers have a shot. The Phillies, though, are throwing Aaron Nola versus Yamamoto. That series is over. I'm putting the money line on Wednesday on the Dodgers, which I just am. So what are you waiting for? Visit the FanDuel app today and get started at FanDuel.com. All right, so everyone loves talking about payroll, right, Jeff? We all love talking about payroll. So the Guardians ended 2025 with a $102 million payroll. Their final payroll in 2024 was 104. So the payroll was roughly the same year over year, and a lot of people were not thrilled. When did we end up saying was the final number, Jeff, for between Austin Hedges and Jacob Junis and Paul Sewald and Carlos Santana and Shane Bieber? What was that number?
So it's what? It was 14 for Santana, 12 or 14 for Bieber, 12 for Santana, so that's 26. 4 for Hedges is 30, 7 for Sewald is 37, 5 for Junis is 42.
So they spent $42 million this past offseason, and 3 of those guys did not finish the year on the roster. They signed 5 free agents, and 3 were gone by trade or release. And and the other 2, Junis and Hedges, obviously stayed and played big roles in this team. So I would say, I wouldn't even say the Bieber signing failed because you got Cal Steven out of it. Like, that's still, to me, I think is going to work out long term. You and I both really like him a lot. So I think that still will pay dividends on the road. It didn't pay dividends in 2025, but this team was not really a Shane Bieber away from winning the first round. Like, you could argue Bieber obviously would be a better fit than Slade Ciccone, but Bieber just started against the Yankees on Tuesday. He didn't pitch all that well. So no guarantees there either. You have to factor in John Means got a whole $1 million and at least 6 next year. So the question is, do the Guardians have money to spend in 2026? Well, that's a complicated subject. I know someone's going to say, of course not, because they're cheap and they'll never spend. Well, that's just, not really a productive conversation. We're trying to have a productive conversation. So right now, their projected payroll going into next year is $74 million, and that includes Emmanuel Clase. That includes picking up John Means' option. That includes all of their ARB figures. So Colby Allard, Kwan, Henches, Lively, Jones, Fry, Brennan, Festa. We already said on yesterday's show that we only think that maybe 2 of those guys are getting their ARB contracts picked up, and probably Kwan and Festa. The other guys might be non-tendered and re-signed to lesser deals than that. If you don't have to count Clase and Ortiz's salaries next year, that's more money off there. So the Guardians relatively have and by the way, Clase at 6'4" in 2026. So they relatively do have a nice chunk there if they get back to even just the payroll they had this year, which is 102. That essentially gives them, again, about $30 million. The question is how they're going to get that $30 million to a player that's going to make an impact to them without doing it long term, because Jeff's going to talk to you about that in a second. And on top of that, you also have to consider the fact that They are still dealing with the TV money fallout, which was the biggest driver of their payroll for a long time. Attendance was up again. It was the first year they've had 2 million fans 2 years in a row since, what was it, 07, 08. So it's been a long time since they had 2 million fans back-to-back years. And they also had 3 home playoff games. There is that the financials where you have to have so many playoff games before you like turn a profit or something. I don't know, because of the payouts and all that stuff. I don't know. Fuzzy math, and I don't do math in the show. It's Jeff's job. All that's good and well as far as the payroll or the attendance. The TV contract is still an issue for them overall, as is revenue sharing, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know how much they're going to add based on that. And David Blitzer, is when the moment that John Sherman came in as the minority owner with a path to take over before he went and bought the Royals, there was an influx in payroll almost immediately. David Blitzer's 2 years into being a minority partner, and 2 years away from being the majority owner. And yes, there's been zero change. There's been zero on-field contribution for his money, which they told us to expect. And lo and behold, that hasn't changed anything.
Yeah, all Blitzer did was allow them to pay off the money that was owed to
Sherman. Yes,
when that came out, because they had money in a frozen account, escrow. That's what it was. Couldn't name it. So yeah, that's part of the problem. Like, the minority ownership hasn't done anything at all right now outside of like transferring and the right to own. And it's an ownership group that Blitzer has. He has his fingers in 1,000 pies. And I feel like it's still a situation where he's debating if he's willing to sell off other assets to make this a main asset or not. I think that is still far from determined by him. The TV money is huge. Let's just be really honest with that, because it was the driver. It was more important. We said, like, I used to say that attendance numbers don't matter 5 years ago because of how much TV money was increasing. Now, Cleveland has, good overall viewing numbers, but bottom line is, when you have the second smallest metro area, according to the U.S. government census, they released a census that I sent to Justin on this that showed that second smallest area for any team in Major League Baseball. That's why Bally's just cut them. They renegotiated with other squads. They cut Milwaukee and Cleveland for reasons. They were not willing, because those are the 2 smallest markets in baseball. When you're looking at all those features, I was kind of surprised after the loss, because also, this past season, they didn't get additional money. That was the other thing. Like, in the past, they got some money from Major League Baseball to help make up the difference in lost TV money. That's not a thing. I'm very curious to see how this ESPN deal works out. In an ideal world, this eventually leads to more of an NFL or NBA situation, because the TV money is the big separator. That's why the Dodgers can keep spending like crazy. If they can get enough teams in and it's more of a shared amount of money and a shared situation, a shared ecosystem from this ESPN deal, maybe they can, it'll help raise all boats. But I've had people get in the comments and want to debate. It's like, no, baseball is a vastly unfair game. Like, the system is broken. There's a reason why a small market team hasn't won a World Series in 20 years. Like, it is vastly broken when it comes to, that. And, you kind of have to hope on a degree of luck. And that was what Cleveland did in free agency. Sewald was hurt the year before. They're banking on him, finding again at an older age. They were banking, Hedges is Hedges. Let's just move on from that. You're banking on Bieber coming back from injury and being what he looked like in those 2 starts and not being what he had looked like the previous year when he had up and down health. You're betting on Santana beating Father Time. And when you're a small market team, you have to make those bets. They were in on Gleyber Torres as a bet. They just couldn't get across the finish line there. And that's kind of where they are. That's what happens. Like, you're not seeing the Reds go out and spend a ton of money. You're not seeing the Brewers go out and get that big free agent. It's just the unfortunate situation of how this game is set up. And until we get something like caps and floors, this is how we kind of have to look at it. And I know you can tell me later I'm a shill or whatever, but it's just math. Like, the other piece
you were going to say too was that in 2027, they also have
everyone's going to hit arbitration.
You're going to have Juan Arb3. You're going to have
Williams and Smith and Allen and literally everyone on this roster is going to start earning millions of dollars. So any contract has to be kind of a 1, maybe 2 year deal. It's like, can you, I mean, yeah, you could say like, hey, they got maybe $30 million to spend this offseason potentially. Could you convince someone like Schwarber to do 2 years, 30? I don't know. I doubt it. Like, you know, and are you willing to put all of your eggs in one basket? Because then if it goes up, you're done. Like these next 2 years are you're hosed if it doesn't work out. Like you have no pathway to success.
All right, we got a couple more points to make on the financial flexibility of it all for the Guardians and free agency. We'll do a more robust free agent show as the offseason gets more heated up after the playoffs are over. We'll talk a little more about that. We'll wrap up the Guardians' postseason media availability on coaches, front office, free agents, injuries, and Arizona fall.
A lot. What do you get when you have a bald eagle standing on top of a silverback gorilla riding a T-Rex? Confidence. Pure confidence. If you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rouget Go Long. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rouget Go Long. That's exactly where Rouget comes in. This isn't just another ED pill. It's a total game changer for confidence. It combines 2 doctor-trusted medications in one dual-action formula so you can get hard and go the distance. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to RUGIET.com and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for 15% off your first order. That's RUGIET.com. Promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Make sure to use our code so they know we sent you.
Thank you all for being here on today's Locked On Guardians every single day. Or if you're catching up on past episodes, I know we had some commenters who were saying they took a couple days off, but they're coming back. That's all well and good. So if you hit the bell on YouTube, you'll never miss a video from us. If you auto-download wherever you listen to podcasts, it'll come right to your feed, so you can always catch up on anything you might have missed and always get the episodes delivered to you daily. And after you're done checking out Locked On Guardians, head on over to Locked On MLB and watch the MLB Game Night channel as they break down every single postseason game. And we also get the insight from the local experts of all the Locked On Podcast Network hosts who know the teams better than the national people do, giving you insights into these playoff games, which have been very entertaining, by the way. It's been a very entertaining postseason. Can't say that it's not. I said on Twitter the other day that this whole expanded playoff thing might have diluted the regular season a little bit, but it has not hurt the quality of postseason baseball. Like, it's still pretty fun. All right, a couple more things on free agency. So, you know, you were talking before about who can they get to take their money on a short-term deal. I will say this, when we do our more robust free agent show, there are guys out there that make sense for them, especially in the outfield we can talk about going forward. The other thing that you have to think about, too, is this can either help or hurt the Guardians. I don't know if it will or not. I've seen a lot of reports saying that free agent spending this offseason might be a little bit tampered down because of an impending lockout, and that will depress salaries. The thing is, you could say that might be good for the Guardians, but at the same time, they're going to be pushed down further by the other teams then, if that's the case, because the other teams are still going to are going to offer more money for the most part, you know, unless you're the Pirates or the Reds or whatever. So I don't think it's going to help you as much because it's just going to push everybody back down a little bit more. So I don't know if that's really going to help them as much. And like you said, I don't know, and maybe after that lockout we have a cap, and then everybody has to figure out their situation there too. And God only knows what that brings. That could get very interesting and sticky. And I also want to go back too, like we were talking about, like, you know, the Gleyber Torres thing too. Everyone was mad that Cleveland signed multiple free agents rather than put their money into one big bucket. Outside of Gleyber Torres, like I can't see anybody who was out there that was like, oh, if they would have just given all the money to this guy, it would have been much better. Like that guy didn't exist. Like there's nobody out there that I can look at and say that.
Because it had to get lucky with the gambles. Like, you know, Seattle got Polanco because we signed Santana. Like, they got lucky in that regard. Like, sometimes you just have to gamble.
And Polanco was good, and Santana wasn't. Although Polanco's still a butcher in the field.
He is, but like, you know, that's the thing. It's like a lot of, if you're not going at the top of the market, and we talked about Michael Conforto on the show, and he's so bad he didn't make the Dodgers postseason roster. We talked about a lot of guys, And, Tyler O'Neill was someone a lot of people talked about coming off a 30 home run year and being a right-handed bat. He barely played. Everyone wanted Anthony Santander. Go look at that year. Like, free agency is a sucker bet, like full stop. Unless you can get the elite talent at the top of the market, you have to kind of gamble. And unfortunately, they're really bad at that. Like, I'll be the first to admit, their free agent gambles haven't been great, but that's what you're going to have to do when you are a team like Cleveland.
Junis worked out. Edwin worked out. But outside of that, and then also going back to trades too, this team has not done a prospect for a major league trade since Brandon Moss in 2015, unless you want to count flipping the infield they got from Pittsburgh last year.
We talked Luplow, like the Luplow deal.
Oh, we talk about Luplow, and I think here's another tease. We think there's a Luplow out there this offseason for the Guardians to go after, so that'll come up on a future show. So stay tuned for that. All right, real quickly as we end the show today, the first thing I want to address is the Guardians expect all of the coaches to return next year. However, we do think that Craig Alvarez and Kai Correa will be interviewed for managerial jobs. Alvarez turned down
the Marlins
interviews, the Marlins and the White Sox last offseason, so he didn't want to leave. I would not be surprised because of the familiarity with the Giants that if Correa and Alvarez get interviews there. There's a couple openings out there anyway. I mean, the Rockies, the Orioles,
the Braves.
The Braves, they'll have openings. So we'll see what happens.
The Angels, who's desperate
well,
enough to do that job.
The Angels have already been reported they're gonna hire Albert Pujols. So
they claim it's not all the way done yet.
Yeah, the Twins have an opening too. So a lot of and we know there's Cleveland people in their front office too. So we'll see how that wraps up. The other element of this too is Carl Willis. Stephen Vogt said as long as Carl Willis wants to be the pitching coach here, he'll be the pitching coach here. It's just a matter of when he retires. Let me ask you this. If Carl Willis decides in the next couple of weeks when the World Series is over, he does not want to continue, he wants to retire, how big of a loss is that for Cleveland?
I think it's a loss. I think it's probably not as big as we'll make it out to be because it's the one thing we know is like it's a whole team approach. Like Willis has great relationships with the players. He does seem to be a calming presence for them, particularly for Gavin. Like there's a very tight personal relationship, we know. But Carl Willis left before and they were fine. And we all thought that I can't think of the guy who went on to be what?
Mickey Callaway.
It's like, and we were worried when he left, and it's fine. Like, it's just been a matter of like they've built a sound structure. I was nervous when Ruben Niebla left, and you know what? They've been fine. Like they keep producing guys. You and I both believe that Brad Goldberg's a rising star. I don't get me wrong; it's a loss. Full stop. It is a loss for the org. It's a loss for a lot of specific players, but I do
if he leaves.
If he leaves, but I think that it is not. It's a small. I don't know if I want to say smaller. It's just not as big as I think I would have thought it would be in the past.
I will say this. If you go back last December, I did an interview with Brad Goldberg right after the time he got the promotion to assistant pitching coach because they were getting overtures to their teams that wanted to hire Brad Goldberg and they had to promote him. Joe Torres has been there for a while too, and a lot of players also credit Joe Torres for a lot of stuff. Like you said, it's a collaborative effort. You got two guys in the dugout who have been, shadowing every move of Carl Willis, and they're also very smart. But Brad Goldberg, one thing he said to me that really stood out, which is one of those things that is not baseball related. That's hard to learn. That takes time, and that's saying the right thing in the right moment. Brad Goldberg said that Carl Willis' best trait, the pitching thing, the baseball stuff's all good and well, but he said Carl Willis' best skill is that he knows when to say something and what to say in that moment. And that's not something you can pick up through baseball knowledge, all that kind of stuff. That takes experience. That takes knowing people. I'm not saying Brad and Joe don't do that. I'm sure they do. We know they do. But that's one of those things that Carl Willis is 64 years old. He's been in baseball a long, long time. And it's, I asked Brad, is coaching being like a psychologist? And he says it kind of is. It's kind of goes into that. So you're building relationships. So that's one of those things to me I think is the most important, is knowing what to say and when to say it. That might be the biggest loss. Not the baseball knowledge, but I think it's the timing. He has impeccable timing, and that's hard to teach. That's feel. That's one of those things that people will say like, oh, you can't. That's an analytics thing. That's an analytics, a non-analytics thing that is very very important, I would say. So we'll see what happens there. He's 64. He has every right to retire if he wants to, but I think he'll be back.
Retirement age keeps getting pushed back in this country, right? 67 now is what they're trying to get people to say. He's not allowed.
Well, hey, my generation says what's retirement. Anyway,
yeah.
The other piece of that too is, Brad and Joe might be getting interviews from other teams too. And when Carl retires, it's easier to bump one of those guys up to keep them, rather than lose them. So the timing of that also comes into play here too, I think, for Cleveland. The other thing too is we run out of here. So Nick Enright, unfortunately, is having Tommy John, which we kind of talked about.
Just can't catch a
few
break.
Weeks ago. He really can. It's unfortunate for Nick. We're wishing the best for him. Very unfair that he's had to go through all this, I would say. So he'll probably miss all of, if not most, of 2026 now. There is no injured list in the offseason, by the way, so they can't place anybody on the injured list. So, pretty much all of it next year, which really stinks. Just reinforces the fact that Cleveland needs to continue to add bullpen arms too. And Daniel Espino, he pitched in the Arizona Fall League on Tuesday night, and he was good. I think we'll spend more time on this in the future as we give more AFL updates on the show. I'm not going to try to throw it in here with the last minute or two we have today, but 1 inning pitch, 16 pitches. He allowed a hit that probably could have been an error. 2 strikeouts. He was 95-98 through some nasty cutters and sliders. The fact that he is back pitching, the velocity is there, the bat missing stuff so far is there, is all the best thing. The results are good, but the fact that we're seeing him go back, throw strikes, and he has velocity, the Guardians just want him to pitch in the AFL and have a normal offseason. That's what they're looking for. Is can he finish the AFL healthy? Can he go into the offseason? The AFL ends in November. Can he just have a healthy offseason, come into spring training, and be ready to pitch a full season? The Guardians were very careful not to point out him impacting the roster in 2026. Same with Travis Bazzana, all that kind of stuff. They said, we hope that they contribute to the roster sooner than later, but they wouldn't put a timeline on it. They were very careful about that. So nobody's saying that Daniel Espino is going to be part of the team next year, but he looks pretty good. All right, we'll talk more 40-man roster breakdowns tomorrow. We said we were going to do that today. We'll do that tomorrow, and it'll be a lot of fun.
Yep, some names to know. Some guys have already been added. It'll be a great discussion. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to rate and review, download daily. It helps. Thank you all, and go Guardians, go.